Welcome to southernsteeple.com and our video series entitled Stubborn Tree, 5 Red Dirt Principles for the Tough Stuff. Once again, my name is Rodney Hedrick, one of the co-founders of southernsteeple.com and author of the book entitled Stubborn Tree, 5 Red Dirt Principles for the Tough Stuff. During our last episode, we actually covered the principle, understand, you won't always understand. And our key Bible verse was Proverbs 3 and verse number 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. Now today we'll be going over the second principle that is entitled Can't be an option. And for a moment, I would like to provide you a little bit of setting about today's episode, a little bit of background. If you'll remember, my dad has basically made me cut down an oak tree with a small hatchet. And this particular episode is going to pick up where I have now been able to finally cut down this oak tree. My dad has led me to the tailgate of his '69 Ford. Tailgate's down, I'm sitting on the back of the tailgate, and then my dad begins to speak to me. And so let's begin. Our Bible verse is going to be Proverbs 4 and 13, which says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. You didn't think you could do it, did you? Dad asked. I hung my head down towards my dirty shoes. No, Dad, I confessed, I almost gave up. But after your little pity party back there, you finally looked up, and what did you see staring you right in the face? I shifted my eyes over to the bank and glared at the tree lying defeated on the ground. The tree, I finally admitted. That's right. And you believed it couldn't be done. You thought you couldn't cut it down. You said you just couldn't do it. Dad looked over to where the oak tree once stood, and then he looked down at me. Well, son, can't be an option. Like an oak tree, life is hard. Long days and sleepless nights can drain us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Most of the time, balancing all the demands of life like jobs, family, church, schools, feels like juggling spinning plates in the middle of a hurricane. And the feeling of constantly sailing against the wind and waves can wear down even the strongest of us. That oak tree was relatively small, only about 6 inches in diameter. The tree itself shouldn't have been difficult to cut down, but what made it seem so impossible was everything going against me that day, like the heat, that little hatchet, and the fact that there was a million other things that I'd rather been doing that day. There will be times in each of our lives when we're confronted with oak trees that look virtually impossible to cut down. And instead of a hatchet, we may only have like a small pocket knife to cut our way through them. I learned that day that staring at an oak tree won't make it go away. My complaining didn't put a single cut in that tree, and so it is with any problem that we face. We can't cry enough tears to make our troubles go away. We can't sit in fear or defeat, hoping the mountains of life will just disappear. But here's the good news. We can pray with the faith to see those mountains move. God is the great mountain mover, even those mountains that we just don't have it in us to climb. The supernatural can be accomplished with prayer, fasting, and faith, as small as a grain of a mustard seed. But here's the sad news. We often bury our faith in graves dug out by shovels of doubt. Let me say that again. We often bury our faith in graves dug out by shovels of doubt. It's human nature to reason what we can or cannot do based on our abilities and strengths. And while we must be self-aware and understand our limitations, we must also be Savior-aware. We must make decisions that are bathed in prayer, saturated in faith, and based on God's power, not on our own. Oftentimes, it's our own belief that prevents God from moving on our behalf. There's a story in the Gospel of Matthew that illustrates the unfortunate consequences of unbelief. Matthew chapter number 13, verses 54 through 58 says this, "And when he was come into his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished and said, Whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas and his sisters? Are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? And they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto them, A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief." Let me say that again. And he did not many works there because of their unbelief. The people of Jesus' hometown were skeptical of his power. They knew that he was a man of humble origins, a man of a lower class family from Nazareth, aka Podunk town. So it seemed very unlikely that he was God in the flesh. How could such a common man be so wise? How could a carpenter's son have divine powers? Not only were they skeptical of Jesus, they were also offended by him. How could such a lowly man dare to equate himself with God? Even though they witnessed his wisdom and miraculous powers, they still refused to believe. As a result of their unbelief, Jesus worked only a few miracles in that town. Jesus' reaction here is interesting. You'd think their unbelief would motivate him to perform more miracles to prove his divine nature. If I were him, I might have tried to convince the skeptics by showing off my powers. But Jesus didn't do that. Instead, he held back. And they missed out on many miracles because of their doubt. I think the same thing happens today. The reality is, Jesus wants to work in our lives. And it's belief and trust that can put miracles into motion. Jesus wants our trust. He wants us to believe that he can provide for us. He can heal our sickness, and he can transform our hearts and minds. There's nothing he can't do. Can't be an option. A mother once told her son before he went into battle to hold on to his shield no matter what, to come back alive carrying it, or to come back dead with someone carrying him on it. Like the soldier, we must be steadfast and dig our nails into the shield of faith. And like the soldiers of Joshua's army, we must face Jericho's walls like they're really going to come tumbling down. And like the widow and her son, we must be obedient even when it doesn't make sense, and watch God fill every vessel in town with oil. And like the small shepherd boy, we must take down the giants with one smooth stone. Like those 3 Hebrew men, we must walk through the fire, believing that we won't even smell like smoke when it's over, because there's a 4th man in the furnace. Like the sick woman, we must keep pressing through the crowd of confusion, believing that we're going to be healed once we've touched his garment. And then like Peter and the apostles, we must pray over the sick like they're really going to rise up and walk. Sometimes we find ourselves in the middle of a storm. We're clinging to the wreckage of broken dreams like pieces of a boat battered by the waves. An eerie voice tells us, you can't hold on any longer. But like Noah building a boat in the driest of deserts, we must know that when God brings the rain, we can float above the rising floods. You see, can't be an option. We face tremendous opposition on this journey. Our opponent is the culprit of confusion, the master of deceit, and father of all lies. These are all titles that he relishes in. As a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, The enemy's agenda is to destroy any aspect of our life that we leave vulnerable, especially our confidence in God. His appetite for destruction is not easily satisfied, and we will succumb to his gluttony if we battle him alone. I've heard that a lion's roar can be heard from miles away. Too often the roar of the enemy rings loud in our ears. You can't do it. You'll never make it. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not rich enough. You're too young. You're too old. You're too weak. You're too broken. Just quit. Give up. End it all and take the easy way out. But as intimidating as the enemy is, we must remember that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Even though the devil is out to steal, kill, and destroy, we know that God is out to seal, heal, and fill our lives with his joy. No matter how loud the enemy roars, he cannot drown out the voice of the Lion of the tribe of Judah saying, I can. You see, can't be an option. I've come up with an acronym I use from time to time that I call DAD. That stands for drive, attitude, and determination. So let's talk about drive. It's been said that ambition is the road you take and persistence is the vehicle that you arrive in. Some people fail to reach their goals not because they don't have ambition, not because that they don't have goals and aspirations and things that they long to achieve, but it's because they don't have drive. They get too tired from those long overnight road trips. Attitude. Our attitude is equally important. A can't-do attitude keeps us paralyzed at the starting line or keeps us from getting in the car at all. But a can-do attitude, it gives us the fuel to keep trying. I once heard a story about a family that was relocating to a new city. They pulled into a gas station close to their new neighborhood and asked a kind old man what the new town was like. Well, the old man replied, "What's it like where you're from?" And they said, "It was awful," they answered. "We hated it." The old man shook his head and said, "I've got some bad news. That's exactly how it is around here." A few moments later, another family came through asking the same question. Except this family said, "Our hometown is wonderful. Sure hated to leave." The old man replied with a smile, "That's how it is here." You see, we take our attitudes with us wherever we go. And then there's determination. Make up your mind that quitting is not an option. Settle in your heart that giving up is not a choice for you. I've learned from many leadership books that success is achieved in inches and not miles. It's dressed in overalls and looks a whole lot like work. And there's no elevator to the top. You've got to take the stairs every time. Success is 99% failure, and there's really no secrets to it. The keys to the car are available to all. So when it seems that you've reached the end of your rope, don't let go. Tie a knot at the end and hold on with every fiber of being that you have, with everything that you've got. Find the drive to keep swinging at the tree. It may be stubborn, but so is your faith. And change your attitude. Crying won't cut the tree down. Sitting in the dirt won't make it fall. Be grateful for the little hatchet you do have and chop away. And be determined. Don't quit until the job is done. Like our Savior who conquered sin on a tree, we also can defeat the oak trees of our lives with the strength that only God can give. You see, can't be an option. Dad was having complications after surgery. He had pneumonia and his oxygen level dropped dangerously low. I recall the medical staff hastily hooking up the breathing machine and asking us to leave. And as I walked away, I saw his body nearly being lifted off of the bed while the machine worked so hard to breathe for him. I overheard our pastor ask the nurses if he could say a prayer before leaving. I went to the waiting room and I broke down. I couldn't take it anymore, and I knew that Dad couldn't either. But then a divine miracle took place. Our pastor came walking towards me, but he wasn't coming to grieve. He was motioning for me to come back to Dad's room. I walked in and Dad was out of the bed, sitting in a recliner, no breathing machine, and was doing arm curls. You see, Dad, he couldn't lift 20-pound dumbbells that day, but he was able to lift all of our spirits with his fierce determination. God has no quit in him, and neither should we. Can't be an option. I'd like to leave you with a few thoughts, a few challenges to ponder, and just a few questions. Make a list of challenges that you know only God could have helped you overcome. Number 2, make a list of challenges that seem impossible for you to overcome right now. Number 3, do you believe these challenges are impossible to God? And then lastly, what is something you've always wanted to try but always talk yourself out of? Once again, thank you so much for tuning in to southernsteeple.com and our Stubborn Tree video series, 5 Red Dirt Principles for the Tough Stuff. We look forward to having you join us next time. God bless.